3 a.m., he whispered, "No one touches her." The glass slipped from her trembling fingers, and the deep red wine splashed across his blue suit like an open wound. His roar filled the entire restaurant, a sound so sharp it froze every waiter mid-step. Her heart slammed against her ribs as his men pushed their chairs back, ready to pounce. He towered above her, shoulders tense, jaw clenched, eyes burning like he could crush the world with one command. The humiliation crackled in the air as she tried to dab the stain off his suit, her hand shaking, the cloth dragging against his expensive fabric. But he leaned in, lowering his voice until it was barely a breath, and the entire room went silent. No one touches her. Before the chaos continues, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is in your city. This will keep you on the edge of your seat. She knew the moment the wine spilled that her cover might be blown. She felt his gaze on her even before the stains spread across his chest. She had been planted there, carefully placed, trained to hide in plain sight. A harmless waitress in beige. A nobody. A shadow. But the way he looked at her, the way his men stiffened at his command, she realized instantly he wasn't fooled. He recognized her. Or worse, he had been expecting her. He stepped closer, the heat of him melting her ability to think straight. She held tight to the cloth in her hand, aware that every breath she took could be her last. His men were circling, suspicious, ready to grab her, drag her away, erase her existence with a single nod from him. But he kept staring at her with unreadable intensity. She could feel the weight of his unspoken strategy pressing down on her chest, trapping her between fear and curiosity. He smiled suddenly, cold, dangerous, calculating. Not the smile of a man amused by an accident, but the smile of someone who already knew the ending of a story no one else had even figured out. He leaned in further, close enough that she could smell the dark cologne mixing with the harsh scent of spilled wine, close enough that the world shrank to just her heartbeat and his breath. His voice was a whisper meant only for her, but loud enough for every terrified soul in the room to understand. Stay still. She obeyed, though every instinct screamed at her to run. He straightened again, sharp and in control, and the energy around him shifted. His men looked confused. They had seen him furious before. They had seen him violent, ruthless, unhinged, but never protective, never shielding someone who made a mess of his suit, never stopping them from finishing what they thought was an obvious threat. She sensed their irritation, their confusion, the silent question vibrating between them. Who is she to him? She lifted her eyes slowly, deciding whether to hold his gaze or drop it to survive. But when she met him eye to eye, she saw it, the glint of recognition. He knew her face. He knew her file. He knew what she was doing there. He knew the family she worked for, the one that wanted him dead. Her blood ran cold. He stepped back a fraction, enough to give her space, but not enough to let her escape. She was trapped in the attention of a predator who wasn't ready to pounce yet. His men were still waiting for his signal, muscles tight, hands twitching toward their jackets. He lifted one finger slightly, a silent command. They froze. She swallowed hard. She had rehearsed everything. Her plan, her route, her exit strategy. But none of her training prepared her for this twist. None prepared her for the moment when the target turned the entire table around in one breath. He gestured for her to follow him. Not asked, ordered. Her heartbeat hammered so loudly she was sure the whole floor could hear it. She hesitated, not out of fear but strategy. Every move she made was being weighed, assessed, dissected. She stepped forward slowly, careful, deliberate. His eyes flicked downward, catching the tiny shift of her stance, the way she distributed her weight, the tension in her shoulders. He noticed everything. Everything. And when his gaze returned to meet hers, she knew she couldn't pretend anymore. He had her figured out. He walked ahead of her, and she didn't dare look back, but she could feel every pair of eyes stabbing into her spine. She followed him through the private corridor, past the velvet curtains, into the dim hallway that led to the VIP lounge. His men stayed behind, but she could sense their gaze through the walls, their resentment simmering like boiling water on the edge of spilling over. She imagined them whispering among themselves, questioning his judgment, questioning her identity, questioning why she was still breathing. The hallway stretched endlessly, and each step grew heavier, more suffocating. She had walked into the lion's den, and the lion had not killed her. Yet, instead, he was leading her deeper inside. He stopped at the door of a private lounge. She froze behind him, unsure if she should stand, speak, breathe. The room beyond the door was dimly lit, shadows carving themselves into shapes that moved with the breeze from the air conditioning. He held the door open and stepped aside, watching her reaction. She stepped in, and the door shut behind them with a heavy click. Silence swallowed the air. Then he spoke again, calm now, composed, the storm replaced with the unsettling quiet of a man who was thinking 3 moves ahead. His eyes traveled from her shoes to her face, slow and deliberate. He wasn't admiring. He was analyzing, calculating, confirming suspicions. She felt stripped bare, every layer of her disguise peeled away without him laying a finger on her. She tried to play innocent, apologize, ramble, act the clumsy waitress, act like she didn't know who he was. But he didn't let her speak. Not yet. His silence was a cage, forcing her to sit in suspense until he was ready. It was a power move, and she recognized it instantly. He was asserting dominance without saying a word. Finally, he approached her again, closing the distance, reaching up to casually brush a speck of wine from her sleeve. His fingers lingered a little too long. Not flirtation. No, control. She stiffened involuntarily. He smirked. He whispered again, softer, colder this time. You didn't come here to serve wine. Her blood iced over. He moved away before she could react, pouring himself a fresh drink, swirling the glass slowly. His voice remained casual, but his eyes were razor sharp. He continued speaking, telling her things she wasn't prepared to hear. He told her exactly when she entered the building, exactly who she spoke to, exactly how long she lingered near the security door, exactly what she did wrong, exactly what she thought she hid from him. His tone was almost amused at how predictable she had been. He knew everything. She swallowed hard, but she couldn't break. Not now. Not in front of him. Not when her mission depended on her staying composed. She steadied her breath and forced herself back into the persona she had practiced for weeks. But when he stepped closer once more, their faces inches apart, he whispered the words that shattered her entire plan. You're not here for me. You're bait. He knew the real traitor. He knew the real target. And he was using her, her mission, her presence, her cover, as the trap to catch the person she was protecting. Her world flipped upside down. The real danger was no longer him. It was whoever was standing behind her this entire time. Her breath caught as the truth detonated inside her chest. Bait. She wasn't the hunter anymore. She wasn't the spy infiltrating a ruthless empire. She wasn't the one with the leverage. He had flipped the entire board without lifting a finger, and now she stood in the center of a game she didn't even understand yet. Her pulse throbbed in her ears. Her throat tightened. Every survival instinct screamed at her to move, escape, run, rethink everything. But she couldn't. She felt her legs rooted to the floor as his words wrapped around her mind like chains. You're not here for me. You're bait. He stepped back with a calmness that only made her panic louder. He picked up his glass again, swirling it like a man enjoying a private show while she fought the urge to crumble. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't uncertain. He wasn't threatened. He was waiting for something, waiting for the next move in a game only he could see from above. A game she was suddenly, terrifyingly aware she was losing. She forced herself to breathe. She had to think. She had to regain footing. But every thought dissolved the moment his gaze pinned her again. It burned into her skin. It wasn't attraction. It wasn't desire. It was domination. Control. A predator watching another predator who had underestimated him. A man who didn't just survive danger. He orchestrated it. Her heartbeat raced so violently she thought it might explode out of her ribs. Her cover was shredded. Her mission dismantled. Her safety evaporated. If he knew who she was, then he knew who sent her. If he knew that, then he knew what she carried, what she memorized, what she intended to steal. Her whole organization was compromised. 100 steps ahead of her, he had already sealed off all exits she might attempt. She swallowed hard, trying to read him. His expression gave nothing away. His stillness was a warning. She took a careful step back, hoping to create space, regain breath, rebuild an illusion of control. But the moment her foot shifted, his head turned slightly, eyes narrowing like a hawk watching prey twitch. She froze again, her mind split between fear and strategy, adrenaline pulsing so violently her hands trembled. Then the door behind her creaked. Her entire body tensed. He didn't turn to look. He didn't flinch. He didn't react. As if he already knew who stood behind her before they entered. As if he had orchestrated even this moment. Her shoulders tightened, her breath hitched, and her pulse crashed like thunder in her chest. She could feel the presence behind her. Heavy, close, threatening. She didn't need to turn to know it was one of his men. Or worse, someone she didn't expect. Instinct told her to pivot, attack, defend. But she stayed still, waiting for the slightest twitch in his expression, the slightest cue. She didn't get it. Instead, he lifted the glass to his lips, took a slow drink, and let the silence stretch until it felt suffocating. Footsteps approached from behind, each one deliberate, each one dripping with danger. Her muscles coiled, ready to strike if she had to. She could sense the person behind her wasn't just here to escort her. There was tension in the air, heavy, electric, violent. Someone else knew she was bait too. Someone else wanted to use her. Someone else had realized the game had changed. The footsteps stopped inches behind her. She didn't dare turn. Her spine tingled. Her fingers twitched. Her eyes flicked to the boss in front of her, waiting, hoping for a sign. His gaze stayed locked on her. Calm, focused, like he was studying how she handled pressure, how she reacted, testing her. He wanted to see if she would break. The presence behind her didn't move. A shadow stretched across the floor beside her, long and sharp. A hand reached out from behind, gripping her shoulder. Her breath stuttered. She reacted without thinking. She whipped around, seizing the wrist, twisting sharply, shifting weight to throw her attacker off balance. A grunt filled the air. A body stumbled. She followed through, ready to strike again. But the Mafia boss caught her wrist midair. Not with aggression, with precision. His grip locked around her like steel, cold and unyielding. He didn't hurt her. He didn't squeeze. He didn't show anger. Instead, he held her in place, stopping her from making a fatal mistake. Her chest heaved. Her breath tore through her lungs. Her eyes snapped back to his. He spoke with a quiet authority that cut through her adrenaline. Not a command, not a threat, a reminder, a warning. She froze, still gripping the wrist of the man behind her. But now she became aware of something she hadn't noticed amid the panic. The man she grabbed wasn't striking. He wasn't attacking. He wasn't even armed. He had been testing her. The boss released a wrist. Her fingers uncurled. She turned slowly to face the man behind her. He rubbed his wrist, but there was no anger in his eyes. Only analysis. Calculation. She had reacted exactly like an agent trained to kill. Her cover was officially dead. The boss stepped closer again, closing any space she gained. His voice wrapped around her like a blade, sliding against skin. You just proved who you really are. The man behind her stepped out of the room silently, shutting the door with a deliberate click. The sound echoed like a trap locking shut. Her pulse surged again. She was alone with the Mafia boss now. No witnesses. No allies. No escape. He moved around her in a slow circle, observing her from every angle. She forced herself not to flinch, not to react, not to show weakness. His presence was overwhelming, impossible to ignore. Every step he took sent her instinct screaming, but she stood firm. Her thoughts spun wildly. If she broke now, she was dead. If she lied now, he would know. If she attacked now, she would fail. He stopped behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. Her muscles coiled again. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. He lowered his voice once more. You walked into my world thinking you were invisible. Her breath hitched. He continued. But I've been watching you since the moment you arrived. Her skin prickled. He stepped around to face her again, and she could finally see it. The satisfaction of a man who had just revealed a truth he had been savoring. He didn't just know about her mission. He had been tracking her movements from the beginning. Every step she made, every corridor she walked, every person she spoke to. He knew it all. She felt anger rise now. A spark. A refusal to crumble completely. She straightened her shoulders. She wouldn't break, not yet. She might be bait, but she wasn't submissive prey. She was still trained, still dangerous, still capable. He smirked again, catching that fire in her eyes. Good, he said. Don't lose that. She stiffened. Confusion tangled with fury. Good? What did he want from her? Why praise her? Then he dropped another bomb. Casual, almost playful, but deadly serious. Your enemy is my enemy. Your traitor is already in my house. Her heart slammed. He stepped closer until she could feel each breath rolling off him. Tonight, one of my own men plans to take me out. Her chest tightened. And you? He tilted his head slightly, looking at her as though she were a puzzle piece finally snapping into place, are the perfect distraction. Her stomach dropped. He wasn't just playing her. He was using her, not to expose her mission, but to expose the person plotting against him. Someone close. Someone trusted. Someone dangerous. Someone who would kill her without hesitation if they discovered her role. She felt the world tilt on its axis. Her mission had changed. Her purpose was no longer what she had been sent for. Now she was tangled in the center of a deadly betrayal woven into his world. She had to think fast, adapt, survive. The air in the room thickened again, but the energy shifted. She wasn't the target. She wasn't the prey. She wasn't the threat. She was now part of the trap, a trap that would snap shut before sunrise. And she wasn't sure which would kill her first, the traitor, or the man standing 3 inches from her who knew too much. Her lungs tightened as the realization tore through her. She wasn't just bait. She wasn't just a distraction. She was standing in the center of a power shift violent enough to swallow everyone involved. The Mafia boss watched her absorb it all, watching the gears turn behind her eyes, watching her panic evolve into cold calculation. He liked it. She could tell. He fed on the fire of intelligent survival. A lesser spy would crumble. She didn't. Her heart pounded, but her breathing steadied. She needed clarity. She needed options. She needed control. But he didn't give her space to rebuild composure. He stepped closer again, as if he wanted the pressure on her chest to never ease. As if he wanted her oxygen measured by his proximity. You feel it now, don't you? The words weren't spoken aloud, but she heard them in his gaze, in his steady posture, in the deliberate quiet he commanded. Her pulse echoed in her ears. She tightened her jaw. She had been manipulated, cornered, outplayed, but not defeated. Not yet. He leaned forward, inspecting her like she was both a weapon and a solution. His hand brushed briefly against her forearm, not gentle, not comforting, testing. Her muscles tightened, not from fear, but instinct. His eyes flared, noticing that reaction, filing it away. Every twitch mattered to him. You don't break easy. Good. The air crackled. She felt eyes on her again. The phantom sensation of being observed, monitored, hunted. She turned sharply toward the door, but no one stood there. Yet something lurked. Something watched. Something waited for a cue. The traitor. She swallowed hard. Someone inside his inner circle. Someone close. Someone who had access. Someone who had power. Someone bold enough to strike at him tonight. Someone who would eliminate her simply for breathing in the wrong direction. Her fingers curled into fists. She had to stay sharp. The boss's voice cut through her thoughts. Low, calm, deadly. Tonight you help me catch him. Her breath hitched again. She didn't agree. She didn't volunteer. But the decision wasn't hers. It never had been. The moment she spilled the wine, even if on purpose, even if staged, her path had been intercepted by a much bigger game. He He tilted his head slightly, studying her like she was the final piece of a dangerous puzzle. You have something he wants. Her stomach twisted. She knew what it was. The flash drive hidden against her skin, the encrypted intel, the coded map of alliances and betrayals. She had been sent to steal. But now, that information was the bait the traitor needed. And the boss knew she had it. Of course he knew. He knew everything. He stepped past her, brushing her shoulder with a controlled, deliberate touch. Electricity shot through her nerves. Not attraction, not fear, awareness. Pure adrenaline. He walked toward the door, opening it just enough to let the dim hallway bleed into the room. Then he turned back to her. You're not leaving my sight tonight. She stiffened, a warning disguised as protection, or protection disguised as control. She couldn't tell. She didn't trust it. She didn't trust him. She didn't trust anyone. But she followed. His men were waiting outside. 3 of them. Thick tension coiled through the hallway as they looked at her, confusion and hostility mixing in their gazes. The boss walked past them without acknowledging their questions. He didn't explain her presence. He didn't justify her survival. His silence was enough to silence them. But their eyes lingered on her. Suspicious, threatening, trigger-ready. She stayed close behind him, matching his steps, measuring every movement. Her training screamed at her to slip away, vanish, find cover. But every exit seemed sealed. The traitor could be any of them. And the boss was the only one who knew how to navigate this labyrinth without getting her killed. The hallway stretched into a sharp turn. She felt a shift behind her. One of the men stepped closer than necessary. Too close. His presence radiated hostility. She sensed the hunger in him, the desire to take her down, to eliminate the unknown, to erase the anomaly his boss refused to explain. Her muscles tensed. He reached forward. She didn't know if it was to grab her, or search her, or shove her, or... The boss turned so sharply the man froze mid-step. A silent warning. The man stepped back immediately. The boss's authority cut through the air like a blade. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The man lowered his head in apology. But she saw the resentment simmering beneath it. The shift in loyalty. The fracture in respect. The doubt creeping in. Good soldiers didn't question orders. But these men did. One of them was the traitor. Her chest tightened. They passed the restaurant floor again, the remaining staff frozen in terror. Glasses untouched. Tables abandoned. People holding their breath. But the boss didn't slow. His stride never faltered. He moved like a man who owned every step beneath him. She moved like a shadow behind him, eyes scanning everything. Hands, posture, micro-expressions. She knew how to read people. She had been trained to know when someone was seconds from violence. Tonight, everyone in that building was seconds from violence. He led her into a hidden stairwell. She hesitated at the threshold. Stairs meant traps, corners, ambushes, blind spots, dead ends. But he didn't give her time to analyze. He stepped inside and glanced back once. A silent order. Follow. Her heartbeat thundered. She stepped in. The door shut behind them with a heavy thud. The sound echoed like a countdown. The stairwell was narrow, steep, tight. Perfect for a forced confrontation. Perfect for a surprise attack. She stayed 2 steps behind him, ready to counter, strike, survive. Suddenly lights flickered overhead. Her breath caught. The boss halted mid-step, not with fear but alertness. A slight tilt of his head. Listening. Calculating. A soft scrape echoed below. Another above. Her pulse spiked. They weren't alone in the stairwell. The boss stepped backward slightly, just an inch, placing himself between her and whatever approached. She stiffened. She didn't know whether to be grateful or furious. He whispered without turning. Don't move. She stayed still, muscles tight, breath shallow. The flickering intensified. Shadows stretched. Footsteps echoed from above. Slow. Too slow. Deliberate. Someone was coming down. Another set of footsteps rose from below. Confident. Heavy. Matching pace with the one above. They were being boxed in. Her fingers brushed against the hidden pocket near her waist. The handle of a blade. A last resort. She didn't want to draw it yet. Not until she identified the threat. Not until she knew which of them was the traitor. Then, in the distorted half-light, figures appeared on both ends of the stairwell. Two silhouettes. Hardened. Focused. Trained. Not random staff. Not bystanders. These were killers. She inhaled sharply. The one above shifted. The one below tensed. The stairwell thrummed with impending violence. The boss moved first. A sharp step forward. A subtle shift of weight. An unspoken challenge. Her senses exploded. She scanned the faces. Both men wore unreadable expressions. Both radiated danger. Either one could be the traitor. Either one could be the one ready to strike. But only one of them had the look of a man who already made up his mind. She saw it. A flicker. The smallest twitch. A micro-expression of intent. Her breath stilled. She knew who it was. Her muscles coiled. The traitor moved. She reacted before the boss did. She launched forward, slamming him into the railing, forcing his arm out before he could pull the weapon he had hidden. The weapon clattered against the concrete. A knife. Sleek. Silent. Designed for a close kill. His eyes widened. Not from the impact, but from the shock that she had spotted him so fast. The stairwell exploded into chaos. The killer on the opposite side lunged too, unsure of who to strike first, torn between protection and attack. The boss moved with terrifying precision. One step, one strike, one devastating blow that knocked the man backward. She wrestled with the traitor, fighting for leverage. His strength was immense. Her training was the only thing keeping her alive. His arms swung wildly. She ducked, barely missing a slash that would have cut her throat clean. She jabbed her elbow into his ribs. He grunted. She used the momentum, swinging her leg behind his, tripping him. They crashed against the steps, metal vibrating beneath them. He seized her hair. She snarled. Pain shot down her spine. She twisted, slamming her palm into his throat. He choked, loosening his grip. The boss grabbed the man from behind, ripping him off her with brutal force. She stumbled up, breathing hard, adrenaline scorching through her veins. The traitor thrashed, kicking, snarling, desperate to break free. But the boss didn't hesitate. His strength was monstrous. He slammed the traitor against the wall, pinning him with sheer power. And then, the traitor gasped something. Not a plea, not a threat, a confession. Her blood froze, because the words weren't meant for the boss. They were meant for her, as if the real danger in the stairwell was not the man pinned to the wall, but something she hadn't yet seen. He didn't care what anyone thought. He wanted her close, and she felt it. Every control breath, every suppressed storm under his skin. She stepped toward him, but before she could speak, the door slammed open and one of his lieutenants rushed in, face pale with a fear that only came when something had gone terribly wrong. Luca didn't turn his head immediately, but the shift in his shoulders was enough to tell her he'd already calculated 50 scenarios before the man even opened his mouth. The lieutenant stammered something urgent, and Luca's jaw locked, that cold, dangerous expression slicing across his face. Isla watched him transform from the man who had just softened for her into the terrifying force everyone else knew. He stepped away from her, but not far, never far, and demanded answers, each word sharper than broken glass. The lieutenant explained the impossible. Someone inside the organization had just moved against Luca's oldest ally, a man believed to be untouchable, heavily guarded, protected on all fronts. No intruder could have broken through without inside help. A traitor. The exact thing Isla came here to uncover. Her stomach tightened because the timing was too perfect, too precise, too connected. She felt her heart pounding, and she wondered whether Luca suspected her again or whether he'd already considered her innocent through some logic she couldn't predict. His eyes flicked toward her for a fraction of a second, and in that moment she saw thoughts racing behind them faster than bullets. He was fitting pieces together, building a picture she wasn't sure she wanted to see. He told his lieutenant to leave. When the door clicked shut, Luca turned his full attention back to her, the air thickening with something darker than tension. He stepped closer again, close enough that she could feel his breath on her cheek, close enough that her heartbeat stuttered against her ribs. He said he needed to know everything she knew now. She swallowed because she had no choice but to give him something without giving him everything. She spoke quickly but cautiously, threading truth with strategy, dropping hints but not full answers. He watched her with unnerving intensity, not blinking, not breathing, not interrupting. When she paused for half a second, he closed the remaining distance, backing her up until she hit the wall. His arm came up beside her head, caging her in without touching her. The air pulsed between them, heavy and electric. He said she wasn't telling him everything. His voice wasn't raised, but the danger in it rolled down her spine like ice. She said she was giving him what she could. He leaned in closer, murmuring that what she could wasn't enough anymore. He needed more. He needed the truth. He needed her. The last part slipped out, like a confession he hadn't intended to say out loud. Her pulse spiked. She felt herself react before she could stop it. His eyes sharpened at the way her breath hitched, and she cursed inwardly, hating how easily he could read her body even when he couldn't read her intentions. He asked her who she was really working for. She hesitated, and that was enough to ignite something fierce in him. He stepped back just an inch, but the cold returned to his eyes. He said quietly that if she didn't trust him now, after everything, then someone else already had their claws in her deeper than he expected. That cut her, harder than she thought it would. He turned away as if about to leave the room, and something inside her snapped. She grabbed his wrist, pulling him back. He stopped instantly, slowly turning his head toward her. She told him she didn't trust anyone, not fully, not yet, not ever, because trusting people got her killed, because trusting people had gotten her burned before, because trust was a luxury she didn't have. Lucas stared at her with something like understanding mixed with fury. He didn't shake her off. He didn't move. He just looked at her, and for a moment neither of them breathed. Then the building shook, not metaphorically. A real explosive vibration rattled the floor beneath their feet. Alarms blared. Someone screamed from the hallway. Lucas snapped into action instantly, grabbing her arm and pulling her behind him as another rumble shook the walls. Gunfire sounded from somewhere below. He cursed under his breath and yanked open a hidden compartment behind a large painting, revealing a narrow, reinforced corridor. He dragged her inside, just as debris burst into the room from the explosion of a nearby wall. She stumbled forward, and he caught her, pulling her tight against his chest as the world roared behind them. The corridor sealed automatically, plunging them into dim light and suffocating silence. Her breath came fast. His was controlled, measured, dangerous. He said the attack wasn't random. She said she knew. He tilted his head toward her, studying her face in the flickering emergency lights. He said the traitor had made their move, and whoever it was wanted her gone just as much as they wanted him dead. She asked why her specifically, and Luca didn't hesitate. He said she was the one thing they couldn't predict right now. She was the variable, the wild card, the one person who didn't belong to either side fully. She didn't know whether that made her feel powerful or exposed. He guided her through the corridor, staying close enough that she could feel the heat of his body beside hers. The building shook again. Dust rained from the ceiling. He said they needed to get to the south stairwell. She followed, adrenaline pounding through her veins, the sound of danger chasing them in echoing waves. Luca moved like a soldier, precise, controlled, efficient. She moved like a shadow trained to slip through chaos. Together, they carved a path through panic until they reached the stairwell door. He paused, hand on the handle, listening. She watched him calculate, sense, anticipate. Then he opened it, and the world screamed back at them in gunfire and smoke. His men were engaged in a violent shootout. The enemy team was masked, heavily armed, relentless. Luca shoved her behind him again as bullets shredded through the walls. His men shouted instructions, firing back. Luca moved with lethal efficiency, grabbing a weapon from fallen guard. Isla ducked low, scanning angles, analyzing weaknesses. She wasn't untrained. She wasn't helpless. She knew how to fight, how to survive. She spotted an enemy on the upper landing, aiming down at Luca's men. Without thinking, she sprinted forward, slid behind a column, and launched a precise shot that took him down instantly. Luca saw it. His expression changed again. Respect. Dangerous admiration. A shift. He He shouted at her to stay near him, but she was already moving toward a better vantage point. He cursed, then followed her with the same ferocity he used in battle. Together they cut through the attackers, a seamless instinctive synchronization neither had anticipated. Her moves matched his matched hers. It was like two storms colliding and forming something terrifyingly unstoppable. When the last masked attacker fell, the stairwell fell silent except for the ringing of echoes and ragged breaths. Luca approached her slowly, eyes burning with a fire she'd never seen in anyone before. She wiped sweat from her brow, chest heaving. He reached out and grabbed her wrist, not rough but firm. He told her she had just proven more than loyalty. She had proven capability. And now he knew, without doubt, that she wasn't the traitor. Isla held his gaze, refusing to look away. He stepped closer, thumb brushing the inside of her wrist, and said something that sent a shock down her spine. She was done hiding. From now on, she stayed at his side. Not as prisoner, not as enemy, not a spy, but something else entirely. She told him she didn't belong to him. He smiled, a dangerous, quiet smile that carried a promise and a threat. He told her he wasn't asking. He said she could try to run if she wanted. She could try to lie. She could try to play her games. But now the whole world had seen what she could do, which meant the whole world would want her dead. And the safest place she could ever be was right next to him. His hand didn't release her wrist. His gaze didn't soften. His voice dropped lower as he stepped even closer, erasing space, heat building between them. He said there was no turning back anymore. They were in this, together, whether she liked it or not. And when her breath caught again, he heard it, felt it, read it. He leaned in closer until she could feel the whisper of his breath against her skin, and he murmured that from this point on, her choices and his choices were tied by blood, by danger, and by something neither of them wanted to name yet. Something fierce, something electric, something inevitable. The air between them throbbed with that truth. And then footsteps echoed again. The next wave was coming. Luca tensed, gripping her hand without even realizing he'd done it. Isla felt his pulse thundering under his skin, felt the violent readiness vibrating through him like the entire building was braced inside his body. He pulled her forward, guiding her down the narrow stairwell as footsteps thundered above them. Gunfire exploded again, ricocheting off concrete. Isla ducked, Luca's arm moving instinctively to shield her even though she was already reaching for another dropped weapon. She moved like a storm. He moved like an avalanche. Together they crashed through the chaos. But this time something was different. The attackers were more coordinated, more precise, more desperate. Someone wanted Luca dead tonight. Someone wanted her erased. A masked enemy lunged at her from the side. She twisted, slammed the heel of her hand into his face, then cracked his ribs with a flawless strike that made him collapse. Another attacker came at Luca. Luca's blade flashed, ruthlessly efficient. The corridor smelled like smoke and metal and adrenaline. Isla's breath burned in her throat. Luca's shoulders glistened with sweat and fury. They were fighting for survival, but they were also fighting for truth, for the final piece of the puzzle they both needed. The traitor, the one puppeteering all of this. A grating metallic sound echoed above them. A grenade tumbled down the stairs. Isla didn't think. She threw herself at Luca, both of them crashing behind a heavy steel doorframe at the last possible second. The blast roared, shaking the stairwell like thunder. Dust clouded the air. Her ears rang. Luca's arms were around her, shielding her from debris. Their hearts hammered against each other. His breath was ragged. Her pulse was a drum. He told her not to move. She told him she wasn't leaving. He looked at her with the kind of expression men wore before they accepted fate. But he wasn't accepting anything. He was calculating again, planning again, the fire returning to his eyes. He dragged her to her feet, ignoring the pain in his arm where a shard of metal had sliced through his sleeve. She reached to check the wound, but he shook her off because there was no time. They sprinted down the last flight of stairs, bursting into a basement corridor. His men lay scattered, wounded, alive, or unconscious. It was a massacre, but not random. They had been overwhelmed by precision, not chaos. Whoever had infiltrated tonight knew everything. Access points, security patterns, weak spots. Isla's chest tightened. Her mind raced through every name, every face she'd investigated. Luca's inner circle wasn't small, but the traitor had to be close, too close, someone with access to schedules and codes and movement patterns. Someone Luca trusted blindly. Someone Isla knew she'd seen. The air shifted. Then she heard it. A slow clap. Sarcastic. Insulting. Mocking. A single figure stood in the shadows at the far end of the hall. He stepped forward, face finally visible under the flickering lights. Luca froze. Isla inhaled sharply. It was Marco, Luca's right-hand man, his childhood friend, his second in command, his shadow, his confidant, the man who had been at his side longer than anyone else, and who had smiled at Isla like she was an inconvenience but never a threat. Marco smirked. He said Luca had grown stupid, soft, predictable. Isla felt Luca's fury explode like lightning behind his eyes. His shoulders straightened, his jaw locked, his hands curled into fists. He didn't move, didn't charge, didn't speak. He simply stared at the man who had betrayed him deeper than any enemy ever could. Marco lifted his weapon, not at Luca, at Isla. Luca moved like a panther, stepping in front of her again with a force that left no room for argument. He told Marco that if he touched her, he'd carve him apart piece by piece and make him choke on every reason he'd ever thought betrayal was smart. Marco laughed, saying Luca's weakness was showing right there in his stance. Isla stepped forward, trying to shift the angle so Luca wasn't taking the direct aim, but he blocked her, refusing to let her expose herself. Her heart twisted because she understood then. Luca would die before letting Marco harm her. Marco raised his weapon higher, grip tightening. The moment stretched. Isla acted first. Fast, silent, deadly. Her shot hit Marco's shoulder, spinning him off balance. He roared in pain, firing wildly. Luca lunged forward, tackling him to the ground. The two men crashed into metal pipes and concrete, fists flying, rage exploding. Isla ran forward, but stayed tactical, scanning angles, anticipating movement. Luca and Marco fought violently, a brutal, emotional war more than a physical one. Years of friendship, trust, and loyalty shattered in every punch. Marco tried to reach for his gun. Luca slammed his arm against the floor. Marco spat blood and venom, screaming that Luca should have died tonight, that the entire empire would have been his, that she, Isla, had come and ruined everything. His hatred hit her like a blade. Luca didn't hesitate. His blade slashed across Marco's arm, disarming him. Isla saw the moment Marco realized he'd lost. His eyes widened with fear and disbelief. Luca pressed the blade to Marco's throat, breathing hard, muscles trembling with rage. Marco choked out a final insult, calling Luca soft for protecting her. Isla stepped closer, slowly, intentionally, body trembling with adrenaline. Luca was ready to end Marco. He wanted to end Marco. But Isla placed her hand on Luca's back. One touch, grounding him, pulling him back from the edge. Luca froze, breath sharp. She whispered just loud enough for him to hear that justice didn't require him to become the monster Marco believed he was. He stared down at Marco, blade trembling. His chest heaved. His eyes burned. Then he slammed Marco's head against the floor, knocking him out cold rather than killing him. Justice served, but not through murder. A consequence Marco would have never predicted. Luca stood, chest rising and falling, hands shaking. Isla stepped toward him slowly. His eyes met hers, and in them she saw storm clouds breaking. Saw the man rebuilding himself, even while chaos still burned around them. His gaze lowered to her hand still on his back. He looked almost surprised by how much that single touch steadied him. She asked if he was all right. He said no, then added that he would be, because she was still alive. The weight of that hit her harder than any bullet. He swayed slightly, wounded arm finally demanding attention. She stepped in, catching him before he fell. He let her. For the first time, he let someone support him without resistance. Their breaths mingled. Their heartbeats slowed together. The energy shifted from survival to something heavier, deeper, inevitable. He told her that from this moment, there were no more lies. No more hiding. No more masks. She nodded because she knew it too. He leaned his forehead against hers, and the quiet between them felt louder than explosions. Not romantic. Not gentle. Something raw and real. A mutual acknowledgement that fate had pulled them together in a way neither would ever escape. His men burst into the hall, finally overpowering the remaining attackers. They froze at the sight of Marco unconscious at Luca's feet, and Luca standing with Isla in a way that made everything clear without a single word. Luca's voice cut through the silence. He commanded his men to take Marco away. Alive. They obeyed instantly. Isla watched the traitor dragged out, watched Luca straighten his posture even through pain, watched his followers look at him with renewed loyalty. He had not lost power. He had gained something far greater. Control through restraint. Respect through justice. Strength through vulnerability. He turned back to her, eyes locked on hers, and said tonight changed everything. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. He already knew. She already felt it. Their paths were now entwined. By truth. By danger. By something neither of them had the courage yet to name. But both of them already understood. The night ended in smoke and betrayal, but truth was finally exposed. A traitor unmasked. A bond forged in chaos. Trust born where fear once lived. Luca and Isla stood together, bruised but unbroken, facing a future neither planned, yet both were pulled toward. Nothing would ever be the same again. Even in a world built on lies, justice finds its way. Loyalty isn't proven by words, but by actions under pressure. Strength isn't just power. It's knowing when to stop, when to trust, and when to fight beside someone instead. Guess your city and what time you're watching this. Share this story everywhere and get ready. The next one will